Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warringham. Thank you. Okay. This hearing session is now open. It forms part of the examination of the Reading Borough Local Plan Partial Update. My name is Ms. Joanna Gilbert and I'm the inspector appointed by the Secretary of State to conduct this examination and to report to the Council in due course. The hearing today will be a structured discussion which I shall lead based on the agenda which has been previously distributed. The agenda for both today and tomorrow are available on the examination website as EX026 and EX027. There has been a small change to the agenda for matter 2 this morning, which is to remove a participant. The purpose of the hearing is to enable people around the table virtually to put forward their points of view and to help me get the information I need. But before we start discussion, I'd just like to complete some formalities, please. Just in terms of preliminary matters, it would be good to start with introductions. So we've got the programme officer, Jane Greenaway, in the call today, and she's the first point of contact if any assistance is required, and her contact details are available on the website and on every letter, matter, issues and questions that I send out. And can I ask first of all if the council officers could introduce themselves, please?
Yes, so I'm Mark Warringham. I'm Planning Policy Manager at the Council and I lead on the local plan as well as a variety of other matters including natural environment, conservation and still in Section 106 monitoring.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warringham. And the representatives, what I would normally do if we were around an actual table is go round in turn and ask you to confirm your name and who you're representing. As I can see all your names, I will just turn to you in order that I can see you on my screens and just ask you to introduce who you are and who you're representing today. So if I can start first of all with Taylor Cherrett, please.
Morning, Mark. I'm Taylor Sherritt from Turley. We're acting on behalf of CBR Investment Management Group in respect to their land interest at Meadow Road in Reading.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cherrett. And you're speaking to a statement that was put in by your colleague Peter Davis, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Then next on my screen, I've got Peter Dutton.
Morning, yes, Peter Dutton from Gladman Developments, representing ourselves. I'll be with you today for this Matter 1 session, and then it'll be my colleague Megan Streets who will be participating tomorrow, just to make you aware.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Okay, and last but definitely not least, Mr. Kirby.
Thank you, Mom. Nick Kirby from Litchfields, representing USS Investment Management Limited on behalf of the sites at Acquiesce House and 33 Blargrave Street.
Thank you. Okay, so just in terms of housekeeping, Ms. Burr.
Hi, sorry, I should have jumped in after Mr. Warringham to introduce myself, but I'm Sarah Burr. I'm a Senior Planning Policy Officer and I work with Mark on the local plan. I just wanted to note, somehow I can't find the hands up function in the meeting. I'm not sure if you all can see a hands up function this morning. It was live in the text.
Let me just check.
No, I can't see one either at the minute, Sarah.
No.
Okay. We may have to do a kind of manual hands up function until the break, and then I'll take a look at all the settings.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so housekeeping, helpfully, as Ms. Burr's introduced. So please make sure that all mobile phones are turned off or switched to silent, please. I'll take breaks as and when they fall during the hearing sessions. So, for example, it might be sensible to take a break after one part of the hearing has finished. For example, duty to cooperate. It will vary slightly dependent on the flow of discussion. And just in terms of speaking today, as you've all put your video cameras on, which is very helpful, if you could keep your cameras on, this would be particularly helpful given we don't appear to have the hands up function at the moment. So if you do wish to speak, instead of upturning your nameplate as you normally would, if you can just put your hand up and indicate to me, that would be very helpful. And I'll turn to you in due course. And if you feel that I'm moving on before you've said all you wish to say, please do the same and stick your hand up, stick your microphone on, and I'll come back to you. Okay. So just to confirm, the documents today, the plan under examination is the Reading Borough Local Plan Partial Update, the LPPU. Prior to submission of the plan to the Secretary of State for examination, Regulation 19 consultation took place, and I have those representations before me and I will be taking them into account. I've previously produced a guidance note, which is EX011 on the examination website, and I've also identified matters, issues and related questions, which is EX010. I've received hearing statements from the council and from others provided on the examination webpage, and that includes all of you that are here in the event today. The council has also published the Reading Borough Local Plan Partial Update list of changes to the submission draft. So that's LP002, and that accompanied the submission of the LPPU. Please note these changes haven't been subject to public consultation or sustainability appraisal, and I've already advised the council that I'm tasked with examining the plan as submitted. So if they do wish to include any of those changes as main modifications, we will need to discuss those in due course. An agenda setting out the matter to be discussed this morning is based on my matters, issues and questions, and we'll do our best to follow it. Just to provide an overview of the examination and my role, I'm tasked with considering the soundness of the LPPU in accordance with the criteria in the National Planning Policy Framework published on the 19th of December 2023. I'm sure you're all familiar with working with a number of national planning policy frameworks, and it's the 2023 one in this case that we're going to be working with, and so whether it's legally compliant as well. The hearings are intended to assist me in this regard, but in submitting the LPPU, the council considers that it is sound, and that is the starting point for the examination. So if you are challenging the soundness of the LPPU, then you need to explain why and what changes would be necessary to make it sound. I've read and will take into account the hearing statements that have been prepared and also the original representations that were made. You don't need to repeat these, but if you do wish to draw my attention to a particular point, please do so. Instead, today, my aim is that the discussion moves on from those documents and deals with specific questions that I have or areas where further clarification or explanation is required. Please do stick to the matter at hand and refrain from commenting on unrelated matters. For example, I am aware that representatives may be promoting sites. This is not the place to discuss those sites specifically. If they are sites allocated in the LPPU, they will be discussed at the relevant hearing. If they are omission sites, it will be for the council to decide which sites it wishes to include in the LPPU if I were to indicate that further sites were needed. In order to test the LPPU for soundness and legal compliance, I will need to ask questions. You will have seen I've already been doing this through my initial letter and through the matters, issues and questions, and the council and other participants have responded in writing. This will continue today. It shouldn't be seen as demonstrating a particular predisposition. I will normally start a particular topic for asking for responses to questions I have before indicating that I wish others to comment. And as previously stated, if you wish to speak, please indicate by raising your hand. I will be looking down and across to either side at certain points because I have 3 screens and I have evidence-based documents on one screen, the National Planning Policy Framework and the opening for today on another screen. And I will also be scribbling away furiously as you speak. So I will attempt to look up whilst multitasking and not miss you out. Okay, and it's open to the council to propose further changes to the plan. And I would ask Mr. Worringham that you keep a record of possible changes that arise during the hearings. and it's helpful if a running list of either the production of any further documents that I've asked for or main modifications should be provided to the programme officer after each stage of sitting, and any main modifications would of course be subject of future consultation. The examination remains open until my report is submitted to the council. No further representations or evidence will be accepted after the hearing sessions are finished unless I specifically request otherwise. And at the end of the hearing sessions, I will look to indicate the likely timescales of the next phases of the examination, and aware that this is stage 1 only. Does anybody have any questions at this stage about procedural matters? No? Okay, thank you. So before we move on to the main agenda for today, can I ask Mr. Warringham to provide the council's opening remarks, please?
Thank you. Yes. So we're pleased to have this opportunity to open the Stage 1 hearings as part of the examination into the soundness and legal compliance of the Reading Borough Local Plan partial update. And we'd like to welcome the Inspector, Joanna Gilbert, to Reading, albeit virtually at this stage, as well as to welcome the other participants in these hearings and to any members of the public or interested parties viewing these proceedings online. Reading's existing local plan was adopted in November 2019 and contains a comprehensive set of policies and proposals to manage development over its plan period to 2036. We conducted a review of this plan in March 2023 within the 5-year period required by law, and this identified a need to undertake a partial update of the plan covering around half of the plan's policies. The need for the update was primarily driven by changes to how policies around housing need and provision are approached, but there were also a number of other updates highlighted by the review as being necessary. As we have progressed, some further areas for update have been brought within the scope, often as a result of consultation. After a call for sites exercise between April and June 2023, the plan progressed to a consultation on scope and content under Regulation 18 of the Town and Country Planning Regulations 2012, which took place between November 2023 and January 2024. Taking account of the results of this consultation and other considerations, such as emerging evidence, a draft local plan partial update was prepared. This was subject to consultation under Regulation 19 in November and December 2024 and was submitted to the Secretary of State in May 2025. Now, we've sought to keep the scope of this update to those updates we consider are necessary. We've avoided trying to perfect or tweak policies that are already in place and are functioning as intended, and have sought to keep the update to those policies and aspects of the plan where we fear that amendments are genuinely required. The approach has been to seek to be proportionate, both in terms of the scope of the update and the assembly of the evidence base, in the interests of getting updated policies in place in a timely manner and allowing us to plan for an increase in the number of much needed homes that Reading is able to provide. It's worth, when considering the partial update, being mindful of the geography of Reading. Reading Borough itself is very limited in scale. It's the 7th smallest local authority in the South East by area. Not only is it almost entirely urban in nature, with those undeveloped areas within the borough largely either at risk of flooding or making up parks and recreational open space, but it does not even cover the whole of the Reading urban area. So whilst the population of the borough was 174,000 at the 2021 census, there are an additional 97,000 people living in Reading's immediate urban area, but in the adjoining authorities of Wokingham and West Berkshire, in what are, to all intents and purposes, Reading suburbs. This is not to mention the much wider area beyond, which looks to Reading as its main centre for higher order services and employment. But despite this constrained geography, Reading has a strong track record of promoting economic growth and securing housing delivery. Reading's consistently exceeded its housing targets, and according to the housing trajectory in the last annual monitoring report, we are on course to exceed our current local plan housing provision figure by around 2,700 homes in total over the plan period to 2036. We recognise that Reading should continue to do what it can to deliver new homes to meet increased needs, and this partial update continues to do so by delivering not only our own calculated needs to meet new homes, but also the outcome of the standard method, incorporating the 35% uplift for the largest cities and urban centres as calculated at the point of submission of the plan. The challenge will be to continue a strong delivery of homes without compromising what makes Reading a great place to live. Reading also takes very seriously its responsibilities in delivering sustainable development, particularly since the Council declared a climate emergency in February 2019. As part of this, the Council seeks the highest achievable standards of energy performance and sustainable design in new development in its area, in line with its climate emergency strategy. And many of the updates to the local plan seek to ensure that this remains the case. It is the Council's firm belief that this can be achieved without undermining housing delivery. There are, of course, many other important areas and priorities for update that this process is needed to address, which we'll no doubt touch on as the examination progresses. In summary, we believe the partial update to the local plan will continue to achieve sustainable development in Reading and succeed in accommodating virtually all of Reading's assessed development needs over the plan period, whilst protecting, preserving and enhancing those aspects that make Reading a successful place to live and work. We're therefore pleased to open this examination and look forward to a constructive discussion. And this statement, if that's okay, will be available as an examination document on the website.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warringham. And yes, that's fine regarding the status of the introduction from the council as an examination document. Okay, so moving into matter 1, which is legal requirements and procedural matters, we will go through the agenda in order based on my agenda and the matters, issues and questions previously circulated. So we'll be starting with duty to cooperate, then moving on to consultation, the local development scheme, statements of community involvement, sustainability appraisal, habitats regulations assessment, and then any other matters. And just starting with duty to cooperate, I have 3 main areas that I wish to discuss today in respect of the duty to cooperate. So those are housing, provision for gypsies and travellers, and strategic transport issues. So taking question 1.1 first of all of my matters, issues and questions, this referred to the LPPU basing its level of housing need on the findings of the Reading Local Housing Needs Assessment, which is July 2024 EV 011, which can be fully met within Reading's boundaries. It was nonetheless considered necessary to make a request to neighbouring authorities under the duty to cooperate to understand the position if the LPPU were to be based on the outcome of the standard methodology. And I asked what this process entailed and could the council point to evidence of constructive, active and ongoing joint working with neighbouring authorities. And if I deal with housing need first of all, could the council just outline to me what meetings occurred, please?
Yep, sorry, juggling multiple screens as well. So the meetings, they kicked off in autumn 2023, which is we had conducted meetings with Wokingham, West Berkshire, South Oxfordshire, Bracknell Forest, and also Basingstoke and Dean. Mm-hmm. So those were that was the first point, I think, at which we were discussing a potential duty to cooperate request, as you've outlined, on should we be required to use the standard method. There was also stakeholder meeting on the housing needs assessment, at which we also underlined that point. The focus of the housing needs assessment was obviously on calculating the level of need, but having everyone in the room, we also made that clear. From that point on, which was kind of, so that stakeholder meeting was March 2024. There were no further specific meetings until the duty to cooperate request.
With any of the authorities?
No.
So, and the duty to cooperate request went out on this matter,
sorry, on this matter.
Oh, yeah. On that particular matter. Okay. Yeah. So just thinking of the timing, Mr. Warringham. So you've got the plan period that the review process occurred March 2023, and the council decided that it would be sensible to review some parts of the plan, and then had ORS been commissioned prior to the September to November meetings with the
Yes.
authorities.
Yes,
So
they were already, so ORS had already given us a draft figure of the 735, which became the final figure by those meetings. So so we were able to start it. I think you can see in the minutes that are in our hearing statement that we're dealing with those figures at that point.
So between September and November 2023, you had the meetings with the various different councils, and you discussed housing need amongst a number of other things that you discussed, having looked at the minutes, and then you had just making sure that I fully understand the kind of timeline of everything. So then the housing needs assessment that had been completed by ORS was then sent to those that had participated in the workshop.
Yes, and well, those who had been invited to the workshop, because not all of the Duty to Cooperate partners actually attended that workshop.
Okay, but it went out to all of them nonetheless.
Yes.
And were they invited to respond at that point?
Yeah, they were invited to comment on the draft report.
And did anybody?
I would need to go back one sec. It's sorry. I believe we had some general comments back that didn't get specific on the methodology or results. If I do have a table in the back of the Duty to Cooperate statement, which lists all of the everything that happened. So I just need to double check that, please.
So this, yeah, sure. This is EV001 for anybody wishing to look.
Yeah. So yeah, it went out in July 2024 and no comments were received, actually. Maybe getting confused in my head with another evidence document, probably.
Okay, thank you. And then, so that was in July 24, late July. And then in late August 2024, that was when the council wrote to all local planning authorities. And there's been a slight change here in terms of the distance that you went. So my understanding initially was it was 10 kilometres, but it was actually 15. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'd written 10 and then I double checked that and we'd actually gone because it's only one other authority that's further away than 10 kilometres but less than 15. Yeah, so actually it is everyone within 15 kilometres.
And you asked them whether there was any scope to accommodate unmet needs based on the standard method figure, which at that time was 878.
Yes, that's correct.
And what happened at that point?
At that point, we had responses from 8 of the 9 authorities, and they did not positively identify any scope to accommodate those needs. There is obviously they put different responses in with different content and different comments on our request, which are summarised in the Duty to Cooperate statement in paragraphs. Paragraph 2.3.3. So the only authority out of the that didn't respond was Surrey Heath.
Thank you. And after that, it was really a focus on statements of common ground.
That's correct. Yeah, I mean the focus after that point was preparing the Reg 19 document and then progressing to statements of common ground. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And just in terms of the meetings that were had, were there any other meetings with did those meetings include members or were those only officer level meetings?
Those were officer level meetings.
Okay, and just in terms of my understanding of how Reading works with its neighbours and has done historically, are there any other meetings that take place between, equivalent roles of heads of planning or that kind of thing that would have discussed the matters here?
Yeah, so there are there's a Berkshire Heads of Planning meeting which I sit on because we don't have a head of planning per se, so both our DM and policy heads sit on it. There's a what we call development plans group, which is planning policy leads, which meets regularly. They're kind of set up to have behind the scenes sharing of information and discussion of issues. So I hadn't cited them in the documentation, but at every point we would do an update of where we all are with our local plans and any issues that are emerging.
And how regularly do those meetings take place?
They're supposed the development plans group is supposed to take place every 3 months. It hasn't met as regular as it used to in the last few years with people's having priorities in terms of their plan making. I would need to, if you needed, I would be able to find the dates when we did meet.
Okay, and well, that may be something that I ask for as a follow-up. And in terms of the heads of planning meeting, how regular is that intended to be?
I think that's on the same basis for around every 3 months.
So
I would need
quarterly.
to double check, yeah.
Okay. So we've got development plans group and Berkshire heads of planning. Okay, thank you very much. And were there any member meetings on this kind of matter as well, or was it was only officer?
They were only officer level meetings, yes.
Okay, thank you. So was there any other correspondence, written correspondence, other than the minutes of meetings which I've seen with those various councils and the letter on the 23rd of August 2024, Mr. Warringham? No,
and the responses to the letter, no. We've put everything that we think is related into the evidence base. So it's the minutes, it's the letter we sent out, it's the responses we've had back, it's then the statement of common ground.
Okay, thank you. Anything from any of the other participants on this particular point? Mr. Cherrett.
So I was trying to find the mute button, sorry. It's just a courtesy note to note that we've obviously focused specifically on housing quite significantly then, and there's obviously quite a big employment need. And it'd be good to understand, because it's not blatantly obvious, what discussions were held in respect of that matter.
Okay, perhaps we can move back to that if there's any. Are there any other comments on housing from anybody else? No. Okay, well, Mr. Warringham, would you be able to deal with Mr. Cherrett's point on employment need, please?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, the same meetings we had with our neighbours also set out our position on employment need. At the time, we didn't have a figure that we were planning for, but we had an expectation that we would be accommodating our employment need within our boundaries. And then we had the commercial needs assessment, which again we sent to those duty to cooperate partners we thought were most relevant, which are the immediate adjoining authorities and those within our what had been previously identified as our functional economic market area, and didn't receive any comments back. I mean, historically, a lot of the conversations have been kind of from other authorities asking Reading whether it had scope to accommodate employment needs. So we had a request from Bracknell Forest in the past and from West Berkshire in the past, which are dealt with in the duty to cooperate statement. But we didn't take it any further than the steps I've outlined there, because we were planning to accommodate all of our needs within our boundaries.
Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Cherrett?
No, thank you at this point in time. I think my other comments relate more to the employment needs and whether it's actually met, and that's probably for a later hearing session.
Yeah, I think so. I've certainly got questions on that for the future for stage
Great.
2, Mr.
Thank
Cherritt.
you.
Okay, thank you. So just turning to that same question, really in terms of gypsies, travellers and travelling show people, Mr. Warringham. So we're in something of a strange situation here with this plan and gypsies and travellers. So I'm aware that the local plan that was adopted in 2019 has a policy within it which deals with the needs of gypsies and travellers. It's criteria-based policy, and there was a gypsy and traveller needs assessment that was undertaken prior to that plan being adopted. I think that was dated 2017. And obviously the council hasn't necessarily sought to make changes to that policy or to update that evidence base, but representations have been permitted on that particular topic, and that leaves me in a situation where I feel it's incumbent on me to ask questions about the situation with gypsies and travellers, particularly because they are quite a strategic part of the engagement with other local authorities in the area. So was there any difference in terms of what you've already outlined on meetings that occurred on housing need and obviously in respect of employment need and so on? Was there any difference in terms of the meetings that were held and the ongoing engagement that took place on gypsies and travellers?
There were no additional meetings on gypsies and travellers. Our approach, having gone through a very exhaustive approach on gypsies and travellers with the adopted local plan, and finding no sites and no likelihood of sites arising, our approach has been to simply bring it up every time we have a chance with another authority. So it gets brought up in other duty to cooperate meetings that we have. It gets brought up in every representation we make to a neighbouring authority. But there was no other specific actions taken at this point because we were not looking to update that policy.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go on to discuss that in more detail tomorrow. Has anybody got any points on gypsy and traveller and travelling show people? No? Okay. Does anybody wish to raise anything specific in relation to questions 1.2 to 1.7 of my matters, issues and questions? So they all relate to the duty to cooperate, but rather than just reading them out and asking questions for the sake of it. Mr. Dutton.
Morning again. It's just a very brief question, if I may, question comment really. You've seen in our Matter 2 statement tomorrow that we're sort of we are raising issues in relation to the process of setting the housing requirement and assessing housing need, and I'm not proposing to touch that at all. And obviously, the question 1.2, where it talks about the position of neighbouring authorities in terms of housing provision. The letter that was sent out to the authorities to understand, or neighbouring authorities to understand their positions in relation to duty to cooperate, was on the basis that whether there was to be unmet need arising from the then standard method figure, would they be able to accommodate any of that need? Obviously, contact in that respect and that question ended at that point, essentially. So we've got initial responses from the authorities. They said what their position would be. And obviously recognising duty to cooperate is not a process to agree, but it's ongoing and active sort of engagement. In relation to South Oxfordshire's response to that letter didn't say outright, we can't accommodate any unmet needs. It sort of said, we don't really want to engage in this process now until there is a clarity on what that figure is going to be. So my question or comment query really is, having seen that we're raising concerns in relation to the housing requirements and housing need assessment, we know that the HBF have raised similar concerns. With that being the case, should that process have been a bit more ongoing than it was, i.e., is it sufficient for it to stop where it did?
Mr. Warringham?
Well, I mean, I'd say firstly, we're obviously in the position where we feel we are meeting our needs in full, and we felt that at the time, and we felt, we'll obviously talk about this tomorrow, but we felt there were exceptional circumstances. We had identified a locally assessed need figure which we were meeting in full. So it's about kind of proportionality of what we felt was appropriate at the time. So we wanted to understand that scope. We absolutely agree there were different, I guess, different emphases in some of the responses we got back, and South Oxfordshire weren't as kind of opposed to it maybe as some of the other authorities might have been. I suppose the other thing I'd say is that the cities and urban centres uplift puts us in a slightly different position, because it means that we have to seek a voluntary agreement with neighbouring authorities if any of the need arising as a result of the uplift, as opposed to the rest of the need, is to be exported to another authority. So it's kind of about willingness as well as capacity, is my reading of the national planning policy framework. So I think that's probably all I'd say on that.
Thank you. Anything further on that point? No? Okay. Anything further on questions 1.2 to 1.7? No? Okay. So if we can move to my question 1.8. So this asked what progress has been made in respect of a statement of common ground between the council and National Highways with regard to junction 11 of the M4. When can this statement of common ground be expected, and how does this meet the requirement to engage constructively, actively and on an ongoing basis with relevant authorities to consider strategic matters through the preparation of a development plan document? So if we can kind of go back in time a little bit again, Mr. Warringham, just can I understand with regard to transport what engagement there was with neighbouring local authorities and National Highways from the beginning of the review process through to submission?
Okay, so I mean, from the beginning, there would have been conversations in those round of autumn meetings that we had in general on transport. They obviously would not have been informed by specific figures, but would have been informed by knowledge that the sites we were looking at, the additional sites we were looking at, were town centre sites. They would have very limited parking, and they would not be with existing uses, and they would not be likely to generate significant impacts on the transport network. From that point onwards, and those meetings weren't held with National Highways, then it became when the actual transport modelling work was available, which, as you'll be aware, is not until after the Regulation 19 consultation had been undertaken, because in my experience, very little point having a conversation with National Highways until you've got numbers for them to look at, because there's nothing for them to engage with. So at that point is when we made that work available. We asked for neighbouring authorities and National Highways to provide their comments on that work, which they did. And in National Highways' case, initial comments, and they've subsequently provided further comments later on in May, I think it was. And we are continuing to do further work on that, and I have an update that I can give if you'd like that now.
Yes, please.
Okay, so Stantec completed their technical note yesterday, the results of their further assessment of junction 11 of the M4. It came to the conclusion that for most of the junction, it could be accommodated within the existing design of the junction. There was a potential issue with the westbound merge part of the junction. So I'm sorry, I'm a lay person with the technicalities of highways engineering, but the westbound merge part of the junction towards the end of the plan period. So I sent that on to National Highways last night with a suggestion that a statement of common ground agrees no concerns around junctions 10 and 12 as per National Highways comments later in May, and that the westbound merge issue be subject to further monitoring and can be picked up if necessary in a 5-year review of the plan, because it is an issue that rises towards the end of the plan period. Obviously, I haven't had a response to that yet because that would be unreasonable to have expected that. But I'm expecting that would form the basis of a statement of common ground.
Right.
Which we have a draft kind of ready to go pretty quickly if National Highways are willing that be the content.
Mm-hmm. And so you engaged with the other local authorities prior to engaging with National Highways on the modelling specifically, and were there any concerns raised by other authorities in respect of strategic transport issues?
Well, the modelling specifically, when it was available, went to other authorities and National Highways at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Other authorities, so concerns were raised. Sorry, concerns were raised at Regulation 19 stage, as you will have seen from authorities, including Wokingham, who objected to the duty to cooperate. So, as a result of seeing that, that Wokingham withdrew their objection, West Berkshire had points that led to the production of an additional technical note dealing with the A4, which is also part of the evidence base. And there were some more general points from Bracknell Forest, but were not particular concerns about the results of the modelling.
But Wokingham was the only authority which raised concerns under the duty to cooperate, and
Yes.
then withdrew those once it was possible to understand the transport modelling information. Yes. And that was shared with them.
Yeah, Wokingham's points were the only points raised under the duty to cooperate by a duty to cooperate partner on any issue. Yeah.
Okay, so and at this stage, just thinking about future hearing sessions, if you've just sent out a note to National Highways with suggestions of how things might move forward, and the suggestion to complete a statement of common ground, what realistic timescale are you looking at for completion of that statement of common ground?
I would not. National Highways need the time that they need in order to act on it. I mean, I don't think I could put a time on it at this point. In my experience, they come back reasonably quickly when it's quite. It's not a long document by any means, so it'd be quite quick to work through. But I couldn't give a time on it at this point. I would hope within 3 or 4 weeks.
As it's a relatively contained issue.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And just in terms of transport, was there anything anybody wanted to say? No? Okay. And has anybody got any points they wish to raise on questions 1.9 to 1.11 on the duty to cooperate? No? Okay. So moving on to issue 2. If we take the first questions on issue 2, and then when we get to sustainability appraisal, I suggest we take a brief break before sustainability appraisal, just to probably get us to around 10:30. So issue 2 is, has the council complied with the relevant legal and procedural requirements in preparing the LPPU? And I asked questions about consultation processes. Has anybody got any concerns that they wish to raise with regard to consultation processes? No, thank you. And I've obviously read the council's response on my question 112. And then there was a question about the local development scheme. Anything that anybody wishes to raise on question 1.13 on the local development scheme? Aside from the importance of keeping it up to date. Okay, and 1.14, so this is about the council's statement of community involvement. So the council produced a statement of community involvement in March 2014. Statement of community involvement covers both questions 114 and 115. There was a later updated statement of community involvement January 2025, which is so we've got PPE 002 and PPE 003. Anything on the statements of community involvement? No. Okay, thank you. Well, I've had regard to all of those and I don't have any further questions on that. So shall we take maybe a 10-minute break now, if that's okay with everybody? Does anybody need longer than 10 minutes? Ms. Burr, would you like a bit longer?
No, I think 10 minutes is all right. I just wanted to please ask everyone to leave their windows open. It interferes with our transcription and recording if individuals leave the meeting. So during the break, if you could please just mute yourself, turn off your camera, and then I'll put up a holding slide. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. So if we reconvene, we might as well make it slightly longer than 10 minutes actually, given we're now at 10:16. So if we reconvene at 10:30, okay, so the hearing is adjourned until 10:30. Thank you very much. And if everybody can turn off their cameras and microphones, but stay in the meeting. Thank you. Hello again. The time is 10:30 and the hearing is resumed. Just wait for everybody to reappear. Okay, thank you. So we've gone through items 1 to 6 on the agenda for today. So if we move on to the matter of the sustainability appraisal. So I asked a number of questions about sustainability appraisal in terms of the hearing statements. Those have been responded to. I do have some further questions. So could the council, first of all, just take me through the whether the reasoning for selecting alternatives has been explained, please?
Yes. So I think we'd like to emphasize that when we were choosing reasonable alternatives, we had a couple of tests. So we wanted to make sure that it didn't result in a kind of scoring exercise per se. So the score itself doesn't determine whether or not a policy or a site is carried forward. Rather, the process of appraisal really serves to highlight any issues or unintended consequences that would require specific mitigation within the plan. And this process was integral. It was performed alongside. When we looked at reasonable alternatives, we were making sure that these were realistic, that they had a possibility of occurring, and that it didn't reflect anything that had been previously tested in the last iteration of the adopted local plan. So I know it might be good if I use an example. So when we were looking at, in terms of testing housing options, we looked at the outcome of the standard method at the time that the sustainability appraisal itself was undertaken. And then we also looked at the outcome of the standard method according to the guidance at the time of submission. We couldn't test this at that point because the sustainability appraisal had occurred previously, but the guidance at the time of submission would have yielded a figure that was almost identical to the proposed option. So we tested. So
that's H11825 homes per year, which is the capacity-based figure, but is very similar to the 822 figure that is the standard method at the point of submission.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, and was there anything further you wanted to add in terms of assessing reasonable alternatives? But perhaps in addition to giving an example of housing, it would be helpful if you could give an example of employment.
Sorry, if you could just give us a few minutes to look at our notes
sure.
on this. We're just juggling a lot of screens. Thank you.
It's okay.
Yeah, so the employment options looking at the sustainability appraisal were simply to revise policy to reflect the latest position on updated need, which was which had been which had emerged through the commercial needs assessment, and essentially a carrying forward the existing levels of need. Given that the existing local plan had evidenced that there was capacity to meet that level of need, the existing level of need in the adopted policy, it's not really a reasonable option for us to be looking on there's no basis for us to be looking to accommodate a lower level of need, for instance, because there's no reason to do that and there's no justification for doing it. So that's not one of the alternatives we looked at. Equally, because accommodating the level of need that we had identified, we newly identified, would essentially maxes out our capacity. There's not really a reasonable option to accommodate more. Firstly, because we don't need to, and secondly, because we haven't got the capacity to deliver any more than those levels of need. So those were the two options on that.
Okay, Thank you. Mr. Cherrett.
Thank you, Ma'am. I'd just like to pick up on the points that Mr. Warring has just made there. Just because they can't meet, or the council's position they can't meet any greater need, doesn't mean it shouldn't be tested as a reasonable alternative. The commercial evidence-based document specifies a figure as an at least requirement. The council should have at least been obligated to look at a need that was greater than what was set out in that commercial needs assessment as a reasonable alternative. And then that goes through the conversation of whether they can then meet that need, which we'll cover in the stage 2 hearing sessions. But as a starting point, my own view is that a clear reasonable alternative would have been looking at a greater level of need than what's set out in that commercial document, in the spirit of positive planning, in the spirit of meeting an at least requirement, and to provide flexibility in ensuring that need is then met through the local plan process. As you do with housing, you add a buffer, the housing need. With commercial, you should apply a similar approach to ensure there's flexibility in the market and the churn.
Thank you, Mr. Cherrett. Mr. Warring, would you like to respond on that?
I mean, I think, yeah, it's about a judgment on what a reasonable alternative is. If there's no further capacity identified, and what you're doing, you're increasing employment need, you're reducing your ability to meet housing need because those are the sites that are available. And we didn't consider that a reasonable alternative at that point. I don't think I'd want to say anything more on that.
Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Cherrett?
No, I think we'd end up going around in circles. I think I've made my point in that I think commercial needs should have been looked at in the round.
Yeah, I think I understand where both of you are standing on this. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything further on certainly, for example, there are a number of homes, the standard method. Mr. Kirby.
Thank you, Ma'am. Not to rehash that same point, but I just wanted to draw your attention to our hearing statement that set out that similar point to Mr. Cherrett was making, but in respect of housing need, that a materially higher level of housing need should have been tested than the standard method need, seeking the NPPF seeking to meet the minimum standard method as a minimum. And we set out that a reasonable alternative would have been to test a materially higher need through that process. So I just wanted to draw attention to that also.
Okay, Mr. Warringham, did you have anything that you wanted to add in respect of Mr. Kirby's hearing statement? I think just to double check, Mr. Kirby, this was the section of the hearing statement which was from 2.7 onwards. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, we do draw from the second hearing statement, but frame it in the context of the sustainability appraisal in that first hearing statement.
Yeah, thank you. Anything you wanted to comment on?
I think at the time, sorry, I think
sorry, Ms. Burr.
That's okay. That's okay. At the time of submission, one of the options that was tested was higher than the standard method at the time. Testing a higher option than the 878 figure would not be expected to give different effects, as we had identified significant negative impacts. And so we don't believe that this was a reasonable alternative. And also we're unsure how we could determine a specific figure higher than that to test as a reasonable alternative.
Thank you.
If
Anything
I could
further,
add,
Mr.
yeah,
Warren?
I mean, you could. I mean, there's endless housing figures that you could test, but ultimately we've tested a figure which is significantly higher than what we're proposing to accommodate, and identified what the negative effects of doing that would be. So we do feel we've covered the reasonable alternatives in a pragmatic sense. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else on reasonable alternatives? No. Okay. I just wanted to turn to the issue of how allocations were assessed within the sustainability appraisal. I'm aware this is a point that I think Mr. Cherrett's interested in, and I'm not sure which of you it will be, Ms. Burr or Mr. Warringham, but could you just take me through the approach that was made to assessing allocations? First of all, thank you.
I think there was a comment in Mr. Cherrett's hearing statement that some of the allocations had been grouped together, but we refute that because we set out to only appraise the policies and sites that were going to be amended because this is a partial update. So because the site in the representation is being carried over from 2019 and is not up for an update, it was not individually appraised again as it would have carried forward whether or not this partial update was taking place.
So what did you do in terms of allocation? If you only appraised those which were being amended, so you've got new allocations, entirely new allocations that have come forward since the 2019 plan was adopted. You've got some sites which have fallen away from the plan, either because they've been developed or because there's no interest in bringing those sites forward anymore. And then you've got sites where the numbers on site in terms of expected delivery have changed quite significantly, and that makes up, correct me if I'm wrong, but that makes up the majority of sites in the plan in terms of there's quite a few which are seeing a change in kind of pattern book densities and
yes, that's correct.
the overall housing numbers, for example. So how did you go about assessing all of those different types of site?
Sorry, I'm unclear. Are you asking how we decided which sites were to be assessed or
yes, in terms of the SA, yeah.
Okay, so at Reg 18, following the call for sites, we assessed all of the sites that came forward in the call for sites. We assessed any sites that were that had a proposed option for a change in the density, and we also assessed any sites that we were changing the language in the allocation. So even if the figures were remaining the same for indicative density, there may have been language added to take account of a change on the ground or a change in national policy.
Okay, and then the new sites were obviously assessed as well?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Mr. Cherrett, did you want to respond on what you've heard in terms of sites?
Yeah, so my specific comments relate principally to policy WR3, and I do appreciate in the essay the council have taken 5 sites out of that and assessed 5 sites within the essay individually, but there is still an overarching essay point where all 19 sites are grouped together, and I fail to see how that can look at the nuances of each different site and reflect the material changes that have happened since the plan was originally adopted. Not wanting to stray into client interests and so on, but if you take Meadow Lane as an example, Meadow Road as an example, which our client has an interest in, that site has not come forward for its intended use. There's no intention for it to come forward for its intended use. So a reasonable alternative for that specific allocation would have been to look at what other uses could have come forward, or it remaining within employment use. That hasn't happened, and the grouping of the allocations together doesn't allow that process to occur.
Thank you.
And just on another point there, ma'am, the overall quantum of residential development on that site has changed as well, but that isn't tested either. It's only a nominal change, but it's
but there's still a difference between the adopted plan and the
that in itself should have then triggered a reflection. Okay, is this actually going to happen? What are the alternatives?
Thank you. Ms. Burr?
Sorry, if I could just have a moment, I'm just going to get up each version of the sustainability appraisal. Thank you.
Yep. Going to get to the point where we need about 5 screens each. Feel like you're in a control center.
Ma'am, just whilst Ms. Burrs is just looking for that, I can't recall, and this just a procedural point. I can't recall if it was mentioned in the opening remarks or not. We've just had an email ping up on our system advising or reminding us that there's a 2-minute silence at 11 o'clock. So we're just wondering whether or not that's going to be accounted for at all.
We will. Yeah.
Can I come back on the question
Yes,
you asked,
certainly.
Sarah? Sorry to kind of do a tag team thing on this, but
Not a problem, Mr. Warringham.
I mean, it comes back to I suppose the point. Firstly, the point is that the sustainability appraisal isn't the entirety of the evidence base. So if you're going to look at deliverability of a site, that's something that it's very difficult to take account of within the sustainability appraisal, because it doesn't really trigger any of the objectives you're assessing against. And so that tends to be where that is often why you'll get an option that scores quite well for a site that's then discounted, is because it actually isn't, in the end of the day, deliverable. That's not applicable to the site we're talking about necessarily, but as a general kind of point. And the other thing is about proportionality. So what we've tried to do is where we're making significant changes to the plan, that's what we're assessing individually. And then, as Mr. Cherrett said, we're grouping the policy generally and assessing the rest together, because that's what we felt was a proportionate approach to the sustainability appraisal of an update to an existing plan.
Thank you. Ms. Burr, have you got all the documents up you wanted to refer to?
Yes, I don't have anything further to add on that after Mr. Warringham.
Okay, thank you. Anything further, Mr. Cherrett? No? Okay. And did anybody else have anything else they wished to raise in terms of the specifics of the essay? So, Mr. Dutton, I recall that you had a point in terms of scoring and summaries in the essay matrix. Did you want to cover that?
Ma'am, I think Ms. Burr actually sort of covered that point before, when she sort of explained the process they've gone through. I think it was that point about when you taking the housing options as an example again, when you looked at option, I think it was H1I, H14.
Yeah.
They scored identical. So it was just to work out what that process was. But I think it's been explained that it came down to sort of like the interpretation of the commentary. Yeah, so I think that sort of, and I think, but just to pick up on that point as well, I think the point made by Mr. Kirby as well, and I know it's straying into matter 2 matters, but I think we sort of like echo the point that he made as well in relation to sort of like testing of alternatives.
And in terms of tall building options, without wishing to stray into other main issues and matters in due course, was there anything else you wanted to raise, Mr. Kirby, on the essay?
Thank you, Mark. I should have mentioned this earlier, but we moved on and I didn't take the opportunity, but so thank you. It was just to go back to the question about housing options testing a materially higher option, and I think it was Ms. Burr's comment that would have generated very similar outcomes. It's just directing you to the part of our hearing statement that makes the point that the assessment carried out wasn't sufficiently granular, so it hasn't captured sufficiently and accurately some of the benefits that result from the delivery of a taller building at our site. Not wanting to get site specific, but yes, it's a comment about the process of the scoring, really.
Thank you. Did the council want to add anything, Ms. Burr?
Yes, I think the sustainability appraisal, because it's not a scoring exercise per se, we are limited by how wide the range is of consequences that are identified. So we would consider the efficient use of land in this location, in a highly accessible location, to bring significant positive effects. So that would be a 2 tick. It's significantly positive. If there were further stories on top of that, what we would already consider to be a significant positive effect, the sustainability appraisal cannot express a, more positive than significantly positive.
Thank you. Anything further on what you've just heard, Mr. Kirby? No?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Anything further on the sustainability appraisal? No? Okay, thank you. So that's including questions up to 1.20, and then the questions on the habitats regulations assessment. So they were my questions 1.21 to 1.24, and I've got the council's responses on that. I wasn't proposing to ask any questions, any further questions off my own bat on that one, having seen the council's responses, but does anybody have anything they wish to raise about habitats regulations assessment? Thank you. And moving on to other matters. So I asked, I think, about 7 or 8 questions on other matters. One of them was 1.25 about being sufficiently clear on which policies would be superseded. The council has responded on that to confirm that as a track change version, it's possible to see which policies are in place, and obviously there's addition of changes to policies or new policies. Is there anything further on that point? I think it was Mr. Dutton who raised an issue.
No, it wasn't so much an issue, Ma'am. It was I think it was a response of completeness, really, to say that we would agree that there should be a clear list of which policies have been superseded. Yeah, it should be made clear, and as long as that's easily interpreted, then yeah, there's no issue.
Okay, thank you. And anything further on? There was also the strategic matters and the minimum time period of 15 years. Again, Mr. Dutton, you made a point about whether it was sufficient. Obviously, we've got an issue now that we're going to move into stage 2 potentially, and stage 2 is likely to be in 2026. So we're moving closer and closer to a point where there might be a need for further time. How does the council respond on that point, Mr. Warringham?
I think we recognise that if we're in a point where we can't adopt in 2026, then we will need to extend that plan period. We'll need to undertake additional evidence work for the additional 1 year, 2 years, whatever it is, and the plan period needs to cover. So I think our hearing statement set that out fairly clearly. Okay,
thank you. Anything further on that point? No. Okay. Thank you for the response on neighbourhood plans and the situation there, and in terms of climate change and paragraph 11A. Just turning to my question 1.31 on issues of equality. Just in terms of the public sector equality duty, can I ask the council to confirm how they consider the duties been met in respect of housing needs, with particular reference to the needs of gypsies and travellers and travelling show people, please?
Well, with the equality impact assessment aspect of that, we're obviously testing what we're updating, which doesn't include that policy. I think if you're looking at it in a wider sense, it's not all the evidence of what we've done at the local plan stage is not in front of you, but the council has gone to really substantial lengths to try to find a site within our boundaries. That process fed into the local plan. It also fed into a process of finding a transit site, which the council subsequently applied for permission for and was granted permission for on land at Island Road. So there are things that are kind of outside this process that the council doing to try to do all it can to deliver accommodation for gypsies and travellers within its boundaries, obviously being highly limited by the nature of the borough and the nature of the sites that are available, most of which are at high risk of flooding and things like that. So that's kind of how I would respond to that. It's not all within the evidence, I suppose, is the answer to that question. But it was at local plan stage, there was a very lengthy, substantial process we went to try to find a site, with genuine kind of political buy-in to try and find an appropriate site and deliver it if we could.
Thank you. Okay. Anything further on any of the questions in other matters at all? Okay. So is there anything further anybody wishes to raise with regard to matter 1 this morning? No? Okay. And so that concludes the questions I have for matter 1 this morning. Mr. Warringham.
It was just a technical question about what we identified in our hearing statement about the proposals map. So I'm not sure how we would be dealing with things we identify as main modifications as we go through the process. I guess we're at stage 1 now, so it doesn't come up as much.
No.
But is that something that we should be making a note of maybe now as a potential main modification?
So what I will do, and this is something I would do in wash up tomorrow as well, is go through what changes I would like the council to record. So there's mention of, I think there's mention of 2 things in the council's matter 1 statement. There's mention of a change on gypsies and travellers in terms of monitoring, and there's also a change in terms of the policies map. Now, what I would envisage the council consults on in due course is main modifications, for which I'll send a table out so you can make a start on populating that. You would obviously have other modifications, which are also known as minor modifications, depending on how long you've been in the system. But basically, they would be modifications that the council wishes to make, but they don't make a difference to the soundness of the plan. So, for example, there are a number of those that the council's already looked to make in terms of updating links to documents and typographic errors and things like that. And most councils do choose to consult on those at the same time. And then there would be consequential changes to the policies map, which would be shown in a separate document, but would be consulted on at the same time. So what I would do is send documents out via the programme officer of how I expect those to be dealt with.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else anybody wishes to raise? No. So the time is 10:58 and the hearing is now adjourned. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 9:30 to discuss matter 2, housing need and requirement. I will see some of you again, or I will see your colleagues. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.